Hello. This is John T. Rhapsodies Esquire, purveyor of awesome old-school audio stories. I bring you today another Sut Lovingood story from 1867 called Old Burns's Bull Ride by George Washington Harris. George Harris walked the earth, or as Sut would say, the yeath, from 1814 to 1869, mostly in East Tennessee. In 1867, Harris published a book titled Sut Lovingood, Yarns Spun by a Natural-Born Dern Fool, containing 24 stories involving his crazy-like-a-fox rural Appalachian character, Sut Lovingood, who was based on a friend Harris made while surveying copper mines in East Tennessee. Sut's real name was William Sut Miller. If you like awesome old-school audio stories from old mines that were once young mines, brought to you free of charge and with a grateful heart, consider while listening to subscribe to this channel and turn on notifications to get notice of new stories. Some funny, some spooky, others somewhere in between, and all awesome. Usually at least once a week. These simple acts will help this channel immensely. And now, hear the words of old. Old Burns's Bull Ride, from 1867, by George Washington Harris. Well now, George, while you are a-waitin' for your chain carriers, I'll tell you how Cicely's daddy, old man Burns, finished that unspeakable bull ride I mentioned in the last story about Cicely Burns's wedding. And I'll tell you how I won my race against all his sons, their hounds, and the neighborhood generally when they were chasing me 'cause of them bees I let loose on the wedding party, and that feed bucket I stuck on the bull's head that took off blind with old man Burns trying to ride him to avoid losing him. Well, after they got out in the road, old Sock the bull and old man Burns riding him struck a piece of timberland, and there the bull lost that feed bucket over his face. Then old man Burns betook himself to unwinding the rope off the bull horns and wrapped it around his left hand to use as reins. Now, as it happens, Squire Mills, he's a bull too, a monstrous fightin', cross old cussed bull too, has Frog Mountain for his circuit this year. Yeah, that Squire Mills just goes where he darn pleases, and thinks he is the best bull in this mountain range. Squire Mills happened to be browsing about in this same piece of woods, and when he heard old Sock, the other bull, a-bellerin' while being rode by old man Burns, the Mills bull took it as a challenge. So he raked up some dirt with his hoof and sprinkled it over his back. Then he dug some dirt out of a bank with his horns and smelled it. Then he took a twist or two into his tail and hoisted it, and felt himself then ready for active service. Well, old Sock and old man Burns came in sight a-tearing through the woods, and then the bulls smelled each other. Both were dead game and mad, so a big fight were morally dern certain. As soon as old man Burns seed the other bull, he understood exactly what were a-comin' and when. So he leaned hisself back onto the rope powerful, till he pulled the stirrup loops tight onto his feet and hauled old Sock's nose and lip way up between his eyes by the nose ring with the reins. But in spite of all this, old Sock steamed straight ahead for the enemy, Squire Mills. Now, mind you, old Sock was already dazed from his intercourse with the stinging bees and his mystification of the feed bucket stuck over his face and eyes that old man Burns had just taken off. Anyhow, as they passed through the thick woods, old man Burns commenced to snatching branches from the trees, first on one side and then the other, and then wearing them branches out, hitting old Sock over the inside of his hoisted lip, square down atwixt his horns. As fast as he wore them branches out, a-hitting that bull, old man Burns would snatch for more. He was just the best man for using feed buckets and branches in an emergency I ever seed. Yeah, old man Burns would thrive in bad skeeter country for sure. Them skeeters would never get in sucking distance of him with all that branch waving. But all that branch waving were all hard thrashing wasted. The bellerin' machine bulls associated anyhow, and they smacked their heads together like two drunk locomotives would. The shock of the bulls smashing together fotch old man Burns out of the dogwood saddle and onto old Sock's neck. But Burns crawfished back dern quick, and never stopped for one moment his thrashing both bulls over their heads and eyes with the branches. The next time the two bulls mixed, they come by guessing with their eyes shut, for fear of that perpetual motion branch hitting them in the eye. It just rained branches from old man Burns, well mixed with some awful offhand cussing. Well, the Mills bull was a mighty smart critter, to be only a cow beast, and he appreciated exactly old man Burns's power with a handful of branches. So while old Sock was a-going through a grand charge blind, old man Burns took a circumbendibus round and gave him mercy's game on old Fuss and Feathers, a-busting hot fire in his rear with the branches. Squire Mills ran forward and barreled in between old Sock's hind legs, and buried his head and horns under old Sock in a full run, a-hoisting old Sock's stern 2 foot clear of the yeath. Right then old Sock were took along wheelbarrow fashion on his forelegs, mighty powerful against his will and comfort, all the while with the brush machine in full blast and getting faster and harder, and old man Burns a-snatching off more branches. The bellerin' and cussin' were mixed now, nigh onto as equal as a careful man mixes whiskey with water, and the mixtry made a most doleful sound. If you'd a-heard it from a half a mile away, you would a knowed there were a heap of hurtin' and wrath a-goin' on where it come from. Now old Sock were hurried on in this unnatural and unmannerly manner over a fallen pine tree, and there old Squire Mills stopped, I suppose to see the effect of his new plan of fighting. And there the Mills bull did a dern fool thing. For if he had a-kept that there head of his in close communion with old Sock's stern, he would have been bound to spoke the word of victory before long. But as it were, it gave him time to turn around with accumulated wrath, the natural bullfighting way. Now Squire Mills had a wholesome fear of the steam brush mill, what old Sock toted on his upper deck. So he come at 'em blind again, and the next time they met they missed, and the horn run under old man Burns's leg and atwixt the rope girth and old Sock's hide. Squire Mills gave a twist and busted the girth, swung that misfortunate old man in the saddle round, and then lent them a big hoist. Up old Sock and the old man went, saddle first, and it hung onto the snag limb of a dead pine tree, just high enough to let old Burns's hands sort of touch ground. There he hung by the heels. Old man Burns set in now and cussed in real earnest. He mixed in a little prayin' with it now and then, for that were a streak of skeer in his anger as he found himself hung upside down hog fashion and a pair of bulls a-fighting around him. His voice were changed like he were down a well, or had a locust in his throat. He bemoaned his condition powerful, cussed his daughter Cicely a while as the first cause, and Clapshaw the circuit-riding parson that married her as the second cause, and then went way back 25 years and cussed hisself for ever marrying at all, as that were the real beginning of the trouble. He talked dreadful to hear about shotguns, hickory clubs, and the devil's brimstone work, a-mentioning my name often in these last remarks. I tell you it were tremendously awful to listen to, coming from a man of family and property, hung up by the heels where two dreadful old bulls were at war. One bull got a run and go onto the other, and backed in against the hanging upside down old man powerful fast. They pushed him as far as the rope would let them, and he, the derned old fool, grabbed a death hold onto one of the tails, and held on as long as he could stand it for his ankles. At last old man Burns let go, and away he swung. Tick, tick, like a derned old clock what were behind time, and were a-trying to catch up again. And him hanging upside down swinging, a-snatching at the weeds and grass, a-fetching handfuls every swing, the praying and cussing never slacking off for anything. I tell you that old man has lots of sand in his gizzard. He has the best pluck I ever seed. Well, George, there the bulls fought, round and round, tearing up the yeath and roots and bull meat. Old man Burns a-watching them as well as he could with his head down while hanging upside down. Directly, the bulls come again from behind, slathered against the old feller, and carried him forward this time, and not clock fashion, but sidewise. Just as soon as the stern of the Mills bull touched him, old man Burns went for a tail hold again, and by golly, he held it this time until his shoes come off, and he fell smack atop of Squire Mills, face to tail. Burns took himself a good handhold into each of the flanks, and locked his legs round the critter's neck. Oh, that old man Burns was just as ready and quick as a cat. His arrangements were made to stay on that bull all night, and for fear of accidents, he took a good holt on the tail with his teeth. Now Squire Mills didn't begin to understand what were atop of him. It were something certain that had both claws and teeth, and had all the force the holt onto his tail could give it. It were a dreadful, dreadful thought to Squire Mills. That bull's pluck wilted, and he just turned tail to the battleground and went aiming for North Carolina, old Sock a-trotting after him, sort of careless-like. Now the tickling into his flanks, the choking round his neck, and the steel trap sprung onto his tail did discomfort Squire Mills powerful. Every few jumps he'd give a hurried, hurtin', short beller, and kick both heels as high as he could. But old man Burns still hanged on and was still there. By golly, golly, old man Burns were growed there, holding on to Squire Mills. Squire Mills struck the river at a point where the bluff were 60 feet high above water 30 foot deep. Derned if ever that bull even thought of measuring it, but just jumped over the edge of the bluff, head down, and of course the old man were going tail down too. Just as soon as he seed the water under him, quick as a cat again, old man Burns sot into climbing the tail, overhanded. But it warn't any use, George. for they both went out of sight, just busting the river plumb open. The last part going under were one of old man Burns's hands, a-huntin' round for more tail to climb. I never seed such waves in the Oconee River before or since, and the bluff were wet to the top, and drops of water were falling off the cedars on its brow. Thinks I, great Jiminy, will they ever come up? After a long time, up popped the old man, already a-headin' for this shore, and away yonder the Mills bull rose horns first, and he aimed for the other bank. They both crawled out, lay down in the sand, and eyed each other across the river. If either of 'em horned up a morsel of dirt, I didn't see 'em do it, but just took to restin', watchin' each other, and havin' vengeful thoughts. That man and that bull were mortal enemies for life. His sons found old Burns and hauled him home onto a sled, covered with straw and a bedquilt. The Mills bull sought himself another circuit and become as moral as a draft steer. Old Sock became more depraved and ran wild in the mountains, and I am just about as I were, the derndest cussed fool in the mess. I just heard from old man Burns yesterday. He is powerful bad off. Made his will, a-cutting off old Sock with a shillin', leaving Cicely and me his maledictions, whatever them are, and $50 in trust in old Parson Bullen's hands for the bringing about of my death. To old Parson Clapshaw, he's left 15 feet of new hemp rope, and to his wife and old Mrs. Clapshaw, that is, his daughter Cicely, $1 to buy arsenic. Then, thinking the business of this world was done, old man Burns just went plumb crazy. Crazy as a bedbug in July. Talks nothing but nonsense. Says the house is upside down. Hears bees a-hummin' of nights, and sees whole droves of bulls a-fightin' all day, and that I is a-standin' atop of the bureau with a basket of bees, a-flingin' handfuls of bees at his head every time he looks the other way. He just turned dern fool, that's all. All the old quilts of women, and the old soggy men round there, visits 'em pretty regular. The women fans 'em, fixes his bedclothes and boils herbs for 'em, and the men heals his bruises and poultices his body. Old Mrs. Burns is mad as a hornet about that arsenic clause in his will, and won't come nigh 'em. Says she has plenty of swellin's of her own to swage, and ain't got time to waste on no derned old ungrateful murderin' fool. And strange to tell, George, old Mrs. Burns sticks to me. Says I'm the best of the lot. Says, too, that I ain't one half as derned a fool as old Burns, and 10 times more of a Christian than Parson Clapshaw. Wonder if it can be possible that woman is right. One thing is certain, though, she is my friend. Well, the verdict of the neighborhood were that I were the cause of the whole thing. A greater injustice were never done in my view, for all that I did in the world were just to help old Sock the bull get a few grains of shattered corn by lifting the basket over his horns. And when I did it, the fuss hadn't even begun at all. Afterwards, I did nothing but stand clear of danger and watch things happen. When they took the vote on who were the cause, every darn one of 'em voted Sut, 'cept Cicely and her mama. Cicely voted bull and bees, and her mama voted Clapshaw. Well, they all got together, headed by Burns's 2 big fox-hunting sons, and took my case in hand. The first thing I knowed, they were on my trail. Horses, hounds, horns, muskets, shotguns, cur dogs, and all. Now my superfine running began. After a long time, I seed from a high point that one of the hounds down the mountain below me was a great way ahead of everything else, and would soon come up with the slack of my britches. So I waited for him. When he bulged for my throat, I reached for his, flung him down, and I give him some comforting advice with a keen hickory stick, and laid him down onto my trail. He did look powerful sorry for what he had done, and then I went to traveling again. When the balance of dogs come up, they all pitched in to the poor helpless devil, and when Burns's sons come up, the old dog were past praying for by at least a half a mile. But that gave me time to get another head start, and by golly, I recommenced a running. I feels, though, George, like my time must come. $50 for bringing about my death is a heap of money, and most of the women are against me. That's the dangerous part of it. I'm a goner, I expect, and I just don't keer a dern. I'm no count nohow. Just look at me. Did you ever see such a sample of a human afore? I feels like I'd be glad to be dead, only I'm afeard of the dying part. I don't care for the hereafter, for it's impossible for me to even have a soul. Who ever seed a soul in just such a rack heap of bones and rags as this? I am nothing but some newfangled sort of beast, a sort of cross between an old monkey and a dern wore-out hominy mill. I am one of Daddy's exploits at making cussed fool inventions, and come before my time. I blames Daddy for all of it, always trying to be king fool. Daddy has a heap to count for, George. A heap. And that concludes George Washington Harris's 1867 Sut Lovingood story called Old Burns's Bull Ride. What did you think of this story? Leave your thoughts in the comments section. I would enjoy reading them. This is John T. Rhapsodies Esquire, purveyor of awesome old school audio stories. Thank you for listening. You can hear more stories like this in the channel's playlists. Find them by staying tuned for the last 20 seconds of this video and clicking on the end screen icons. You can also go to the channel homepage and click on the playlist tab. If you enjoyed this story and would like to hear more, please download the YouTube app, create an account, subscribe to this channel, like this video by clicking on the thumbs up icon, leave your thoughts in the comments section, click the notification bell, and share the videos with your friends so that they too can hear the words of old.